Hello there, you lovers of alternative rock and all sorts of groovy music. I'm here to talk about one particular American band. And, well, have you ever had a band that you like? Maybe you got into them quite early and you liked the early stuff, and then you somehow kind of lost a bit of interest in them. And then you either lost interest totally, or maybe you went back again a bit later and got back into them. Well, that's kind of what I've been doing with the Strokes. Now, I have always quite liked the Strokes since they first appeared. The year was 2001. So how old was I then? Well, I was getting on for 30. So I was maybe older than the average person who was going to be getting into a cool new band, but I was still trying my hardest to be cool. And I remember that there was a bit of hype around this band from New York, and they'd done this EP. I think was it an EP or a single, whatever. But I didn't buy it physically. I actually downloaded it, and I think I got it from Napster. Do you remember when Napster was a thing in those early days of the internet, when you could naughtily download songs and listen to them? They were MP3s. They didn't sound that great, but it was a good way to sample music, and obviously a precursor to the unfettered water on music, like water on a tap, that we've got now with streaming. But I was quite interested in this band. As soon as I heard them, I thought they were pretty cool. I think the first song I heard was "The Modern Age," which was the original version of it, not the one that appeared on their debut album, although the one on the debut album is also a great version. But I think there was a slightly rawer version of that, and also the song "Last Night," which came out on I think it was an EP or a single or something in advance of the album. So I'd heard a few tracks by the band, and so I was quite enthusiastic for the release of their debut album, which was due to come out in September 2001. And we got the UK version over here. There it is. I think the US version had a different front cover, and the US version, as I remember, had an altered track listing because, of course, the 9/11 attacks had just happened in New York, so they thought it would be inappropriate to have the song "New York City Cops," which was quite disparaging about the New York police force. They thought that would be inappropriate given the number of officers who just died in the attacks. So they switched that track, and it was different in America. I don't know whether it's been changed again in the US since then, but certainly there was an altered track listing for the US version. Very successful album, of course. It was a big hit over here, and I remember the singles from it were played a lot on the radio at the time. Last Night, I think, perhaps the best known of the songs on the album. But the thing about that album, "Is This It?", which of course was their comment. I think it was a comment on all the pre-release hype about the band. There were some tracks on there that were not quite as commercial as the singles, but really good album tracks that kind of grew on you over time. I'm thinking of things like the actual title song, "Is This It?" and "Hard to Explain." That was one I really liked as well. And then when the second album came out, which was only a couple of years later, I think, they put out "Room on Fire." And that was an album where, as I saw it, more of the songs were like those less commercial album tracks, not as many obvious hit songs on this second album. But I really liked the second album. I used to have it on in my car all the time or whatever, and I listened to it probably as much as the first album, even though it perhaps wasn't quite as, not quite as commercial as that. But I thought it was a fine follow-up album. I think the so-called difficult second album, they'd done pretty well on that. And then in 2006, the third album was this one, "First Impressions of Earth." And this is one that came in a rather groovy packaging. You get all different pictures of the band, and you can change the front cover on this disc case and everything. But the album, I felt it was a longer album than the previous ones, and I felt that the first half of it was good, of a high standard, but I wasn't so keen on the second half of the record. And maybe I need to listen to it again. Maybe I need to come back to it after all these years. But I have read other reviews by people who are fans of the band who do feel that the second half of First Impressions on Earth is a bit weak, that the songs aren't very well formed. And I have to say that was my impression as well. And so I then kind of lost interest in the Strokes, really. I was obviously, listening to other stuff and whatever, and they didn't do anything for a while. And I think there had been talk of friction within the band and that kind of thing. And so I kind of tuned out from them, and I never listened to any of the albums they've done after that until recently. So I've started, I say recently, it was probably a few months ago now, I first started listening to the 2011 album Angles, which I don't actually have on a CD. I've been streaming it. So there it is. It's that one with that particular front cover with the prominent yellow and blue and red thing, whatever that is. Angles. I must admit, the first time I played it through, I was sort of a little bit underwhelmed, but I decided I would persevere with it. So I had it on in my little Bluetooth earphones when I went out running, and I put it on in the car, and it gradually seeped into me. It's an album where, if you ask me any of the themes of the songs or any of the lyrics on it, I can hardly remember a single lyric on this album. It's just really the music that has got under my skin, and I kind of really like it. There's a lot of really good guitar playing by the two excellent guitarists in this band, Nick Valenci and Albert Hammond Jr. And how could I describe it? It's a little bit more 80s sounding than the early albums. It's a little bit more produced, got a little bit of a different sound to it as well. I'd say more of an 80s sound. The early albums, of course, had quite a garage rock, deliberately underproduced sound. Gordon Raphael was the producer for that. I'm not sure who produced this Angles album. I'll have to look it up. I'm pretty sure it's not Gordon Raphael. But yeah, as I say, it has got a bit of an 80s vibe to it. There's also a track on there that reminds me of Thin Lizzy. And there's all sorts of influences on it. It feels like there's a lot of influences on it. But I'd say it's I've found it to be a grower, and I can put it on and just kind of drive along with it on and enjoy it. So I just wondered what you think about Angles by the Strokes, or what you think about the Strokes generally. Are they just a bunch of posy rich boys from New York, or were they the saviours of rock and roll, and could they still be? I understand they've been making an album recently with Rick Rubin. I know they did an album in 2020. Actually, they've done two albums after this one that I've been listening to. They did Come Down Machine in 2013, and then the more recent one in 2020. And I've not really got into those albums yet. I'm trying to go through chronologically, but I would welcome your comments, your angles on the Strokes album Angles, and maybe we'll try and get Ben into that as well. We'll see what we can do with Ben. I don't know how much Ben is into the Strokes, actually. I can't remember now. I think he quite likes the first album. Don't know if he's got any further than that, but we shall find out. But thanks for watching. I'll be back in a bit with another video, and not too long from now, I'll also be back with Ben. So thanks for watching. Thanks for all your comments, and we'll see you soon. Take care.